Hi, I'm talking to Ned Menoyo, founder and president of EEM Law. Ned is an entertainment lawyer who graduated from Northeastern University School of Law, but more importantly, to us at least, he's a creative type, like everyone who's here on Zoom with us today and who will be watching this later. Ned majored in theater at the University of Vermont and later got his BFA in drama from New York University, which is my alma mater also. Ned's also a musician and an active member of SAG-AFTRA. Thank you so much for being here, Ned.
My pleasure.
So we're talking about AB5 with you today. So first of all, will you tell us what is AB5?
AB5 is a law that went into effect January 1st, so a couple weeks ago. This passed last September, signed into law by Governor Newsom. Basically, what it does is it changes what an independent contractor is. It changes it. It codifies, meaning the legislature wrote a law that interpreted a case holding. The case was called the Dynamics decision. And the Supreme Court of California gave new parameters for what an independent contractor is that were different from anything that had existed before. The old test was called the Borello test. And that was pretty simple. Most people could meet who you would think of would be traditionally an independent contractor. In my world, where I'm working with musicians, that would be kind of any musician you hire for a gig, or even a band hired by a venue. Those will all be independent contractors. But the new law is, it was generally designed to sweep in Uber and Lyft drivers who were considered independent contractors by Uber and Lyft. Why the legislature wrote this all-encompassing sweeping bill that literally took into account the entire economy, every worker in the state, is a mystery to me. Like it was done in a way, having actually spoken to some legislators now as part of groups who are working to try to create exemptions for musicians now who were not exempted. I'm learning that they didn't understand the industries, many of them that they've now changed the law on. So it's going to change economies that they didn't even understand how they work. Very, in my opinion, sloppy, actually like negligent legislating. And so the bottom line is there's a three-part test now. The three-part test is often called the ABC test. The ABCs are basically if you pay someone for some service and they don't meet all of the ABC, not just one, but all of them, then they're technically your employee. So under the law, you're going to have to comply with all wage and labor laws, including giving them a W-2, withholding taxes, providing workers' comp insurance for anything you do with them, which I don't know, I mean, everyone here is creative. In the music business in particular, which is where I live 90% of my time when I'm doing entertainment law, is, you've got everything's a one-off, basically, that deal. You go do a gig at a show, it's $100. You then will hire people to do your show. You pay them each $100 kind of thing. And every interaction like that now is going to be something you're going to have to like W-2, put them on payroll, get workers' comp for, which is actually almost impossible to get. Now, the woman who wrote the bill, Representative Gonzalez, did so basically with the backing of the Federation of Labor in California. And they will say things like, you're not the kind of people we're going to go after for enforcement. Well, first off, they are not the ones who enforce the law. The law is enforced by the governor and the executive branch, and they're entirely separate people. Second off, if that wasn't the intent, why would you have people under the law? These people want to comply with the law. They don't want to live in some shadow world where they're not complying. And so my involvement with this law came about when one of my clients asked me how it would affect them. I read it. I was like, there's no way it's that bad. Oh, yeah, it's that bad. It's more than that bad. So I was actually quite surprised at that.
Yeah. So would it help to actually incorporate yourself?
The things that helps are, I think it very well could. Let me tell you the ABCs, and then you can decide for yourself if it affects you. If it does affect you, there are some exemptions. There's a whole list of the way the legislature codified the law. They actually ended up writing like 30 professions are exempted from the law. And there's no rhyme or reason to why. I really think it comes down to, and I've had legislators nod their head when I've said this to them in person, who had the best lobbyists in Sacramento. Now, the independent musicians I work with didn't even know this bill was happening until it was already signed into law. So there were music industry groups who were brought to the table who didn't agree because the musicians union wanted the law. So there were a bunch of groups, but none of them represented the independent musicians I work with. So largely this was done very quickly, in my opinion, in the span of about 9 months last year, with very few, public notices it was happening, no town hall events, no, so bottom line is, no, it might help to incorporate. I'll tell you why. So the A test is that the person is free from the control and direction of the hiring entity in connection with the performance of their work, both under the contract for the performance of the work and in fact. And I think most creatives kind of meet that. Even though I'm hiring a drummer, I'm not telling him how to play the drums. I hire someone else to do something for me, like say drive me around in the car. I could say, take a left, take a right, take me here, take me there. That's more, they're under your control. But like a drummer, they're a professional. They generally, I'm not going to tell them how to play. I might tell them to hit the hi-hat there, but maybe it's even more of a suggestion. So A, probably most creatives would meet that. B is kind of where everyone gets stuck. Or in the music business, everybody gets stuck. The B test is the person performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. So that's like, I hire someone to come in and do something for me. I'm not an exterminator. They're exterminating for me. I'm not in the business of extermination or whatever, just pulling that out of thin air. But they are, and so they can still be an independent contractor for me. But if I'm a musician and I'm in the business of making music, I'm in the business of recording music, playing it live, and so that's my business, and they're coming in to play music for me, be part of my record, be part of my live set. That they would fall under B, like pretty much without question. And letter C is the person is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as that involved in the work performed. And most people would meet that too. They would say, yeah, I'm an independent drummer. I go play for a lot of people around town. I would meet that too. So yeah, there are a bunch of exceptions. I won't bore you with the whole list, but it's doctor, lawyer, accountant, there's like a whole bunch of people exempted. Mm-hmm. Well, let's assume you're not exempted. So how do you get around it now? Yep. Would it help to incorporate? There's two different ways it might help to incorporate. One of the provisions of the laws is called the professional services contract provision. And there's a bunch of things someone has to meet for that under that professional services part of the law. You have to be licensed if you do a profession that needs to be licensed in your city. So maybe you have a business in Los Angeles. I think every business in Los Angeles has to be licensed by the city. That's a hoop people have to jump through. There's a bunch of things. The contract has to be in writing. You have to use your own tools. You have to have your own separate place of business. Like most creatives would need a lot of that. If they're not licensed, they might have to become licensed.
Unless you're like a TV producer or writer, right? You're going into an office.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so you're probably not going to be able to use that there. But even under professional services contract, there's a short list of occupations that qualify for that. So like fine artist, grant writer, graphic designer, they're covered, but musician isn't. So if you're a fine artist, like you're a painter, then you're covered if you have all those things. And so that's one way to get through this is if you're in I call it the secondary list of exemptions. I'd be happy to read them off to you if you want. But then going forward from there, there's another exemption called the business-to-business exemption, where if you're one business contracting with another business, then you can be exempted. If you meet a lot of the same requirements as a professional services contract requirement, so it has to be in writing, you have to have your own place of business, you have to do this. And so, but if you're a business, now, I don't even think you need to incorporate. In fact, my reading of this law is that you can become a sole proprietor, even a sole proprietor, but certainly a sole proprietor. And it even says sole proprietor in the law. So it's not like the law is a kind of amazing thing to read. It's like Alice in Wonderland. So it's almost hard for me to believe that they meant sole proprietor, even though it's right there in black and white. Because if everyone becomes a sole proprietor, then, there are some steps you have to take to do that in California. It's not like you're going to say, I'm a sole proprietor like you can in some other states. But in California, you have to get a tax number, employee identification number from the IRS. You have to have a fictitious business name, even if it's my name, Ned Menoyo, lawyer. I have to file a fictitious business name with my county and then have it published in a newspaper for 3 weeks or something like that. You have to be, I think you do have to be licensed by the city or, that you live in to do business. But there's about 5 things you have to comply with like that. Pretty basic, but most of the musicians I know are so right-brained, they're not going to want anything to do with any of that, So I'm actually going to start probably offering my services up just to make sure people are doing it. But the problem with sole proprietor, even though I do think it's a silver bullet here for creatives, it's kind of my most recent thinking on it. The problem with it is that I can become a sole proprietor myself, but if I want to, that helps other people who want to hire me. Right? Like that exempts them from they need to also be a business. Like the problem with it is that everybody needs to do it. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do it, so if someone tells me, yes, I'm a sole proprietor, and I hire, say 4 musicians I hire to play in a band, all say they're sole proprietor. First off, you have to have a written contract. That's the other thing. You have to have a written contract with everybody. I can't get my musicians to even write the most basic written contracts about who wrote the song. That later could end up being worth millions of dollars,
Is that mutual? Let's say it is the company, like a production company hires you and they write you a contract, but then do you have to write them a contract back?
Only if I think it has to just be in writing one time, I would say. Yeah, I don't think a production company will probably supply you with a contract. It just has to be evidenced in writing, I believe. But the problem is if none of those people or all of them would have to be sole proprietors for this to work. Mm-hmm. Like everybody has to be a business, so business to business. And there's a loan out corporation exemption in the law too. That's kind of along these same lines.
What is that loan out? Because that is something that, a lot of people, especially who are TV producers and writers, are facing is that, maybe companies may not want to do the loan out. If you are incorporated, they may fear that, or, that's one of the concerns from a lot of people I'm hearing from.
It shouldn't really be a concern, to me. If I were a production company, it wouldn't be a concern because the concern comes with a loan out company is that, so a loan out company is, say I'm a TV writer or director. A friend of mine's mother is a TV director. She has a loan out company. Yeah. Loan out companies have a lot of advantages, especially if you're making high income, because you can treat it as corporate income. And you can also take, because Donald Trump got rid of the employee tax deductions at the employee level. It almost makes sense to become a company, an LLC or something, where you can take deductions at the corporate level. And so you can deduct the cost of your home office if you're a writer. So you do most of your writing in your office. If you're just an employee of a production company, you can't do that anymore. But if you're a company and the production company hires you at your company, a loan out company basically says it's Ned Menoyo writer, and so that's a legal entity, and then that company then loans me out to in exchange for the fee. The fee gets paid to my company. They loan my services to the production company, my writing services, and so the reason some companies might be worried about it is, in a lot of times people will incorporate to avoid liability. You incorporate to give one level of shield between you and being liable for something. Yes. Versus, Ned Menoyo, you can just sue me, don't do it, but people sue me directly. And if I'm not a company, but my law firm is a professional corporation, partly for this reason. It creates a bit of a barrier to your personal finances. They have to go through your business finances first and then get to you and say that it's called piercing the corporate veil, to say that this is actually a fictitious business just set up to provide liability protection. But in most loan-out corporation contracts with production companies, there's actually a clause that says, like, this shall not, like the person we're contracting with here is essentially the writer, and they can't avoid having to do the work if we pay them just by the virtue of having this company. So that, like, this is, the loan-out company is like a well-worn Hollywood, you know, mostly film and TV, but some musicians too, thing. And it does create that kind of, which is why I don't think we're hearing CAA, you know, we're not hearing Endeavor, we're not hearing ICM when we talk about this law. They don't care because almost all of their clients are going to have loan-out corporations.
Mm-hmm. Unions have also come forward and said it doesn't really affect them because they are considered employees, actually.
And that's the other thing is, like, the big studios will often W-2 everybody just as a matter of course. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, like, it's really not going to affect a lot of them. Although, to the extent they have any independent contractors, it will affect them. But you're right. Like, that's the crazy thing about this law. And I mean, it's hard for me to talk about this law without talking about what's wrong with it and how we need to fix it. And so I'm part of groups of people who are actually trying to do something about it. And it's not, there's a cleanup bill happening right now. So if you have concerns about this, you can talk to your state representative, talk to your state senator. Lorena Gonzalez is the one who wrote it. You can call her office, let her know. But we're in a situation where they know that they left these massive gaps. And the whole law is designed to prevent workers from being exploited. In the music business, I can tell you that it's literally having the opposite effect. The people furthest down the food chain are the ones going to be hit most by this. And that's going to lead to, like, the music industry, the independent music industry in California, which is a bigger and bigger and bigger segment of the music industry. It's becoming more, like, that's the new music industry. One of my friends wrote a book called How to Make It in the New Music Industry. And it's all about being an independent artist and making a living, a good living, even becoming famous and a star independently. That's the new model, but because of technology. But every single one of those people started out at the level of the people I deal with, you know, playing the local venues in Hollywood, writing songs, doing, you know, playing with each other. So it's going to have a chilling effect. I call this bill the anti-creative economy bill law. And a lot of states, and I said that to my state rep the other day, and he kind of gave me a wry smile back, like, you know, like, because I'm from the East Coast, and so I know that there are jurisdictions outside of California that pass creative economy bills where they want people to come. Cleveland or whoever wants to foster a creative economy in their city, so they'll give tax incentives, they'll give tax breaks, they'll just cut red tape. They'll make it easier for people to be artists in their world because they understand that, first off, it's an awesome thing for a community to have creativity happening in it. It creates a vibrant, better way of life. And that was one thing that Senator Robert Hertzberg, who's the Senate Majority Leader we met with, amazingly cool guy. His son is actually a very accomplished opera composer, Juilliard graduate. Like, so he gets this. He said it's one of the things that makes California, California. You know, when you're talking about California, like, we talk about the arts, we know about the Laurel Canyon scene from the 70s, you know, we know about these things. They're historic, they're legendary. And it's like part of what makes California a place everybody wants to be, whatever your art is. And LA's art scene, not just music, is off the hook right now. You know, it's incredible. And I often wondered, before I even heard about AB5, I'm like, what could knock, I was thinking about the music business, what could knock the music scene in LA off its stride? Because it's kind of like this well-acknowledged, the best music scene in America right now. You know, it's happening in Los Angeles, like, by far. And so when that word gets out, the best people all come here. They all want to be part of it. They want to be part of the beehive. And then I read this bill and I was like, this is it. Like, this is it. This is the thing. When someone's 18 years old and they're deciding where to go start their music career, why not go to New York? Why not go to Atlanta? Why not go to Nashville, where they're not going to have to hire a lawyer and an accountant on day one? You know, should we not get this exemption? I think this law could also actually be challenged in court. There are some provisions in the law itself. There's one provision that says that if the law cannot be applied to a certain segment of the economy, then a judge can find that it's not workable and apply the old test. So right built into it, there's a challenge capacity. The truckers, independent truckers, like basically the non-union truckers, recently just sued and in federal court, because if you think about it, trucking is the epitome of a job that has interstate commerce. Like they're going across lines, state lines all the time. And music actually is too, and other industries are as well. So the state is not allowed to put an undue burden on interstate commerce. So that's how they won. They won that. They got a preliminary injunction. I think it's going to lead to like an automatic exemption in the bill, in the cleanup bill. So listen, it's what's crazy is that this law is in effect. And that one client who came to me asking me how it was going to affect him, he's a very sophisticated guy, and he's grew up in the entertainment industry, so he could see it coming. And he actually has an accountant and stuff. His accountant's like, he's going to record an EP, 4 songs in the studio, pay his friends a couple $100 to do it. He recorded it in December so that he wouldn't have to do it. I mean, there are companies we know of, we're starting to document. People are not there. I think up in the wine country, somebody decided we're not going to hire musicians. Like, we don't want to deal with this. Schools are shutting down. Schools aren't hiring music teachers. Like, it's having an actual effect, like right now, actually. And so it's a really wacky situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. Well, let's open it up for questions for those who are here right now, because
Sure.
they have some questions. Tish actually has one. She says, I'm a performer and also have a training company with a small part-time team under 10 who are all 1099. What is the implication of this for my team?
That's, what kind of performer is she online right now?
Yeah. Tish, do you want to come on and speak? She's a actor.
Yeah, oops, where am I? Here I am. I'm an actress and I'm a voiceover performer.
Okay. So the people you train are what? Actors or?
I have a voiceover training company, and then I have a team that supports my voiceover training company. So there's implications of I'm teaching people about the business, so I need to know about this, so I'm guiding people correctly. And then I also have my team who keeps the business going. That's all 1099. Works part-time.
Like, I mean, like, you make I probably shouldn't give like actual legal advice. I'm going to say that right at the top. Like, I'm not, I need to like not have a disclaimer,
Right.
Like, because I don't know all the facts of your situation. I want to start by saying, like, people on the group I'm working with have often brought up, what about other performers? Because it will apply. And in our lobbying efforts, we're just laser focused on the music industry right now. And we're working with Music Coalition people about it. But being an actor myself, my heart kind of breaks for other performers that will, yes, be hit by this. It's not, the reason SAG-AFTRA isn't involved is because they're 95%, almost all of their performers are going to be W-2'd by whatever production they're on. But what about independent film? I mean, it's an excellent question. Every single time I talk about this with somebody, I hear about another area of the economy that's going to be impacted. Mm-hmm. So the answer is, you're definitely going to have to comply with it, like in some way. So I don't, off the top of my head, the people who hire you when you're training people,
yeah, I guess
you could have an argument that
they're
not in the business of training people, So you're probably good there, but it's anything 1099. Where in the anything that was in the past 1099, you really have to look at those 3 A, B, C, and see if you can find a wiggle room and like B, maybe like you're not in the same business as that or whatever. Like if I was going to do a cartoon and I needed voices and I hired voice actors to be in it, I think they would have to be employees under this law, because I'm in the business of, you know, on the other hand, they're in the business of voicing a character. You could argue I'm not in the business of voicing a character. I'm in the business of producing a cartoon. Those are maybe different enough. But
okay, so I've got so many layers of this that I need, because there's myself, there's the people that I'm training, and then this question is actually about, like, I have a team, like I have an assistant and I have people who help me with various things. So is that like, they will need to be employees?
The assistants could probably, it'll probably won't change, because if they only worked for you, they might have already had to have been your employee. Like, unless they do work for other people, they probably were not technically independent contractors already.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's one thing, like whatever. So that probably is still, whatever analysis you did to decide whether or not they were or weren't employees in the past, like your office assistants or whatever, that's probably going to be the same. Like, so they either are, and they should have been employees in the past, and they need to be employees now, or they don't. It's more the, like, kind of things like voice acting, you know, it's not really if you're the voice actor, it's on the employer to, like, it's the burden's on them to classify you. That's how the government talks about it. The employer classifies the employee. They either classify them as an independent contractor or they classify them as an employee. And so say someone hires you to be a voice actor. Like, the burden's on them to comply with the law and not comply with the law. You can say, listen, I believe I'm an employee under the law. You have to W-2 me, you know? It's the employee who makes the complaint, though. Like, the employee under the law makes the complaint to the government. So if an employer doesn't comply, they're risking some disgruntled employee going to the EDD and saying, you know, they should have treated me like a W-2 and they didn't. Employee. Now, with regard to your school, when you're training people, I'm trying to think off the top of my head how that would fit.
And
I really don't. I don't have an answer off the top of my head. I'd have to look into it.
Okay.
It's like, it doesn't fit one of the exemptions, I can tell you that. Like, but I'm trying to think, like, sometimes you feel like, how could it apply? Like, that doesn't make sense. But then when you really think about it, you're like, yeah, you go through the steps and you're like, okay, they don't mention anything about training programs in here. I guess it's almost like a voice teacher. I guess your argument would be, and again, consult your own attorney, but your argument would be, I'm in the business of giving singing lessons. They're not. And so maybe it fails under B.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Well, I want to open up to other questions. Would I talk to an attorney, or would I talk to an accountant, or both?
I think, like, an accountant probably wouldn't be able to give you a legal opinion. So I think a lot of this is going to be, because you're interpreting the law, I would talk to a lawyer probably.
Okay, great. And then
I would talk to a lawyer. I mean, you probably will need to then implement it through the accountant.
Okay.
But some accountants might know the answer to.
Okay, and then real quick, I might have missed this at the beginning. What happens if you don't comply? Like,
no, I didn't go into that, but there's, you know, suffice it to say, you don't want that to happen.
Okay.
There's penalties. There's injunctions. They've authorized. You know, well, I can tell you one thing. I went to a continuing legal education program about entertainment law last week, and one of the lawyers giving the presentation held up a letter from the EDD, Economic Development something. They enforce a lot of the labor laws, and he got this very scary letter from them, where they were talking to him about his law firm and how he classified his own employees. And he told me, he said to us, it was chilling for him to get that letter.
The lawyer
the
was
Franchise Tax Board. Yeah, yeah. The Franchise Tax Board, the EDD, like whoever, Division of Labor, these are not people you want to be getting letters from.
right.
Like nothing good is coming when you get the letter like that. And I think it's an open question. I do know that the governor just implemented, just part of his budget for this year is $20 million just to enforce this law. So they're taking it seriously. The bottom line is there's 7, I think what happened here is that Uber and Lyft kind of spoiled the party. Like music and other creative arts are the original gig economy. Like gig actually comes from the music industry.
Right.
But Uber and Lyft kind of like hid behind that cloak and said, we're gig too, you know? Really, they're this massive billion-dollar business.
Right.
And the estimate is that the state was missing out on $7 billion a year in unpaid payroll taxes from like Uber and Lyft. This is about, like, in my opinion, a follow the money situation. And the dollars are unthinkably large for how much money the state was missing out on.
Yeah.
On the flip side, you know, we had that Napster situation when people were file sharing music, and the government just went after like 5 or 6 normal citizens, kids who were sharing like lots of files, and tagged them with basically federal crimes, you know, federal penalties. So like, there's a reason none of us want to be on the wrong side of enforcement. And so I just think what happens, like, not good things, you know?
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tish. Okay, let's get to some other questions. Emily, you raised your hand. Do you have a question for Ned?
I did. I actually have a couple of things. So it's safe to assume that actors and writers then were not exempted from this in that list of exemptions?
Some writers, like, but not the writers I think you're thinking of. Yeah, like some freelance
like
journalists have a 35. They can do 35 pieces for one entity a year without it being an employee status. But yeah, there's no exemption for, say, creative writers or film writers, film, TV. There's no exemption for actors.
And am I correct in understanding that there's no penalty to the employee? It's the employer's. It's essentially it's on the onus is on the employer. Is that right?
The onus is definitely on the employer, but I'm not going to go so far as to say there's no penalty to the employee, because you have various things working together, and the government could say to you when you file your taxes as an employee that, you know, you're filing your taxes incorrectly. You should have filed it. You should have been an employee and not an independent contractor. I don't know. I think like a lot of this is yet to be determined. But definitely this law is about what happens to the employer. Okay.
And then my last question, my husband and I actually do have a loan out corporation. He's a cinematographer, and I'm a writer and an actor, and almost everything we do, we get paid through them. Do you think that this is going to, like, do you think our employers are going to want to stop paying us through them and start W-2ing us again? Because we actually do take a lot of deductions through our corporation.
I don't think so. Like my guess would be, like, I think it's going to be business as usual for anyone who has a loan out corporation now. Would be my guess.
Okay. That's sort of my big question. But then as a corporation, if I want to hire someone, or if I want to, like, hire somebody to come and shoot something with us or whatever, then I'm going to need to W-2 them probably, or use a payroll service kind of thing.
Yeah. Because if you're in the business of making a film and they're shooting your film, like, everything is arguable, you know what I mean? And I don't think we're really going to know until someone gets sued by the government. Like, enforcement happens against somebody and they push back and there's a lawsuit. Or unless you take a proactive lawsuit against the government saying, this shouldn't apply to me for X, Y, and Z reasons, like the truckers did. But, you know, I mean, it does seem to me that if you're in the business of making films and they come in to shoot your film for you, like, you probably have to W-2 them under the law as it stands now. And if I were a government lawyer, that's how I would probably read it. Yeah.
Okay. Well.
All right. Anyone else have any other questions? type into the chat box and say you have a question. But otherwise, Eleni asks that she's thrilled to hear that there's something in the works to amend AB5. I know there's legislation in New York and New Jersey that resembles this closely, and I've heard of other states with similar legislation in the works. I wonder if things might swing in the other direction, i.e. labor law changing across the US.
The other direction being what? I'm not.
This law going across the U.S. Like I think.
Yeah, I mean certainly something's happening for sure in a lot of different places. I think we're the guinea pigs right now. Although I did read that Massachusetts has a similar law in effect. Although I haven't read the Massachusetts law, but I don't think it can be quite the same as this one because. The person who wrote about that law in Forbes magazine talked about how it didn't really have a negative effect. I think whoever wrote this law maybe looked at Massachusetts and said that wasn't strong enough. I don't know. But yeah, it could have an effect. It could take root nationally for sure, especially when states realize how much money that they're losing out on. Hopefully that when we streamline it here, other states will take notice of that because the people this law is intended to protect in our business in music is hurting them the most. So I don't know. Every state's going to have its own set of priorities. California has its own priority, as Senator Hertzberg said, of like what makes California California. Other states are going to have other industries that are important to them or ways of life. And so, yeah, I'm sure whatever laws they institute will reflect their personal culture and their state culture.
Okay. And then somebody wrote in and asked me to ask this of you. And I think you pretty much have answered this, but does this mean less work opportunities? Does this mean those who are hired, those who are hired as employees will have more work on their plate because there will be more expectations? What does this mean for wages? Will this shut down smaller production companies?
I think it could. I mean, I think you're going to find people thinking twice about doing productions that they would otherwise do. Just like we already know that, certain things are already being negatively impacted now in the music business. If someone looks at, it's kind of like, when you write legislation, you generally even the smallest incentive can have a big macro effect. So that's why when they make a creative economy bill, they do small little things can make it just that much easier that it has a big macro effect. I think the same is true in reverse. If you create some kind of impediment, some kind of chilling effect, it can have a macro effect that reverberates exponentially. I certainly think that that's possible. That's what I'm most worried about. I don't know about wages. I'm not an economist. I can't tell you how it would affect that. But I definitely worry about someone choosing not to record an album, or choosing, in this day and age, literally choosing to use machines rather than people to write music. Literally write music now. AI. It's incredible to me that with AI right on the horizon, that you would write this law, because you've got even now, the biggest pop acts, I'm told, and a lot of major labels are using AI already, without even this stuff. Should we hire someone? Should we not? People are using live musicians less and less already. That's already the trend. And in fact, I was talking to people who were involved in the recording of the music for the Grammy presentation, and all of that music was already recorded. They're not going to have live musicians. They might have people pretending to be on the stage, but 95% of the music you're going to see at the Grammy Awards is already recorded in Burbank 2 weeks ago. So they're not using live performers anyway, and maybe this just chills it even more. Why bother? We have to W-2 everybody. They have to be my employee. And we've had members of the group I'm part of just even try to comply. One woman has a company where she basically gets a commission from an orchestra, an opera or orchestra, and then she hires the people to either go do the recording or play live. So she'll hire 80, orchestra musicians to play. And so technically under this bill, she would have 80 employees. And she tried to find a payroll company that would even do that for her. And she found one, but she'd have to carry all 80 of those people all year long with a monthly fee for each one of them. And, it was just, the cost was insane just to comply with the red tape, or the employer-employee status. She knows that they lost a job already because of this law, where they didn't say this is why, but, they just went and did it someplace else, Eastern Europe, or Texas or someplace. So in her world, there are only a few sound stages that are capable of holding that many people. Like, I think LA has one or two. There are very few of them. And so, but other places are building them. And I think Nashville is building one. So we have competition in other words. Yeah.
Emily, I think you have another question?
I do. Is the law from $1, or is it because I know when you're reporting, when you're 1099ing someone that you've worked with, you don't have to 1099 them up to $650. Is there any kind of you can pay up to X number of dollars before you have to hire them as an employee, or is it from $1? It's $1.
Dollar limit. There's no dollar.
Okay.
There's no dollar. They don't even mention dollar amounts in the bill in the law.
Wow. That's kind of. I mean, I would say that would be a good change. It's once you start, if you pay somebody over $500, you have to put them on the payroll. But I'm kind of amazed that that's not part of it. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's not there.
That was the law last year.
That was, the law. Yeah. I mean, at least you don't have to 1099 them up to whatever, $650 or something. So. Okay.
So thanks.
I'm actually not a labor lawyer. I'm a lawyer who read this, and so listen, I mean, what this law means, this is just my best take on it. I know for a fact that other people disagree with me because I've read very acrimonious comments thrown my way but I can tell you that enough people who I respect, the vast majority, it's almost like global warming. There have been a few people attacking people like me for just being almost chicken little about it, but it's and I'm really not that kind of person. I don't run around saying the sky's falling. But when people say to me it's not going to be as bad, or it's not going to affect this, or it's not going to be, I just say to them, show me in the law where it says that. And so far I've met with 2 state legislators. My group met with another. I'm meeting with another one on tomorrow. I've seen a dozen other lawyers' takes on this, and all of them at least agree with me. No legislator has said to me, "You're reading the law wrong." They're saying what they're saying is it's a bad law, but we wanted to get it passed because we wanted to capture Uber, and they're basically tough competition. We wanted to get it done fast. I mean, to me that's victim blaming. We're we want to be on the list. I literally had one guy say to me, "Well, the list is getting too long of exemptions." I'm that's not logical. If you're going to harm these economies, that should be the reason you get on the list, not because the list is getting long. Mm-hmm. It's victim blaming. You want to be on the list. Why are you bothering me? Well, it's going to harm us. Well, the list is too long. It's well, maybe you wrote a bad bill.
I have a question from Corinne. She says, if I live in California, but my 1099 work is exclusively performed in another state where I do not have a residence, does AB5 affect me? The company paying me is incorporated in California, and the earnings are more than $25,000 if those details help.
I guess I'd have to know a lot more about it to know whether AB5 even applies, but assuming it applies, so it's a California company, but the work happens elsewhere.
Right, and then she also lives in California, but the work is done elsewhere. And it's...
Well, I'll say bringing, that kind of goes to something else, I'll comment on. A lot of people like Corinne probably don't want to be W-2 because they don't want to get the taxes deducted at that level. she probably like has a fine balance in her life where she's getting a certain amount of money in. She's able to make her taxes work with her accountant. She doesn't want to get like all that money sucked away into payroll, Social Security and everything, and then get it back in April as a return. You know, so like that's another way it hurts people like her. I would say that probably it would affect that California company if they're a California company. I mean, that's an excellent question. It's actually an excellent question because a lot of tax things are apportioned on where the work happens. So like when truckers drive across the country, they're taxed for however long they're kind of in each state. And so whether or not you're taxed, I'm not a tax lawyer, but whether or not you're an employee because you're doing the performance, say in Montana, or you're doing the work in Montana, but it's a California company, that's like, I can't, what I would say is if California law applies, then yes, you know, but if you're otherwise paying taxes under Montana law or whatever jurisdiction you're in, then maybe not. Then you have maybe an interstate commerce argument as to why it shouldn't apply to you. Like federal law trumps state law, but it only trumps it if it's in direct conflict with it, which is why the truckers got their thing. Excellent question. Can't tell you an answer.
Yeah, and then Chelsea sort of said to piggyback on Corinne's question, what if the hiring company is not incorporated in California? She lives in California. She shoots everywhere, all over.
I would say, I mean, in that case, like, you know, the company is probably under someone else's jurisdiction, would be my take. And that's why, like, you know, the question was, who does this law is really written to employers. Maybe, however, the company needs to comply with California law. This is not something I've really looked into. I haven't researched it. So I can't give a real answer, but that's really on whether or not that company believes that the jurisdiction of California is something it has to comply with or not. And you know, if they may be incorporated elsewhere, but if they're operating in California, they probably do have to comply with California law. You know, so if the filming's happening here or whatever's happening here, they probably do have to comply. I really can't give an answer. But it's something that company will have to like figure out.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of gray areas right now with this law because
it's, I mean, like if you went to the legislators and asked them these questions, they wouldn't know the answers. I guarantee you. Like they do not know how that's what's the craziest thing about this law. And is that they passed it, not, in my opinion, really understanding how it was going to affect everybody. And the thing is, it's in effect. So like, I was talking to my state rep, and I was like, he's like, you know, we knew we were going to have to sort something out. I'm like, yeah, but like, you passed a law that could harm the economy. You're not going to know it till the harm's already happened. Versus having taken the time to like think about it and have testimony, you know, figure it out. Like and I said to him, like, I think what the end result of this law is going to be is that a lot of people are going to get angry. And I said to him, in my experience working with government legislators in Massachusetts and Maine, where I'm from, it's like, you know, most of them actively tried not to anger people, tried not to anger their constituents, tried not to anger, you know, because they wanted to get reelected, you know. And in this case, there's like a sense of callousness to the people who proposed this bill, that it's kind of like, this is just the right thing to do. It codified the Dynamex thing. That's the excuse we always hear. But it codified the Dynamex, but then it's like they broke it, they bought it, because they took the Dynamex thing and then they added all these exemptions to it. And they added other ways out of the bill, the loan out corporation exemption, all that. So they wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted the Dynamex thing, but also to make certain groups happy and leave everybody else out there flailing, going, how does this affect us? It's an incredible thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Ned before we wrap it up? Looks like everyone.
I will say, like, you know, I'm happy to talk to anybody about their personal situation. And nothing I said here can be taken as like actual advice. Please talk to your own lawyer or accountant, or call me or something, because it really is going to be dependent. Whatever your personal situation is going to be very dependent on whether or not the law affects you. And very few people have really even begun to think about the law, never mind think about how to like be compliant with it. And it is a moving target because it's changing. But certainly if you were encouraging a lot of advocacy, and nothing will, if writers want to write letters to editors, op-ed pieces, contact your state rep, your state senator. I'm in touch with a bunch of music people. If anyone is in the music world wants to reach out to me, we're trying to do something about it. But like public pressure will go a long way here, I think. I think it's already starting to work in the music world, but who's fighting for the other performing artists? I don't know yet.
Right.
So, or other creatives.
Well, this is great. I mean, just to have a little bit more information about the bill and to kind of understand it from a law perspective is actually very helpful for all of us. And because you have a creative background as well, so that's why it's...
Yeah, well, I know for my own music, it's like I might not, I'm probably going to think twice or not hire someone to go play the piano for me while I croon away, But I'll probably do it anyway. But it's like, it's just that extra thing. It's crazy. Like I'm gonna have to W-2 someone to pay him $100 to play a backing track for me while I sing My Way or something, Thank you for, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Like I really hate to, have to make people nervous and anxious. But on the flip side, like I keep looking for rainbows and silver linings. I think the sole proprietor one is the best way to go right now. Like
right.
that's my kind of takeaway.
Or being getting yourself an LLC.
Get an LLC, become a sole proprietor, which is a lot cheaper than LLC because LLC you have to pay like $800 minimum tax a year, things like that.
California does not make it cheap.
Yeah, but sole proprietor, that's more affordable, and I think if you become a sole proprietor and work with other people who are sole proprietors and companies, you're probably good.
Yeah, you don't get the liability protection, but you...
Yeah, exactly.
So, thank you again.
My pleasure, Kay.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for joining in and asking questions. Well,
all right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.